So since I just hit record, I'm going to start again. So welcome everybody to class today. I just hit record on the button, but I started talking about assignments. So it's great that for the last assignment that you did, that one of them, you had two assignments. One was a summary and one was basically crafting an essay, right? Building from the different pieces that we did over the last couple of weeks, right? We know from the sentence, from the paragraphs to adding a conclusion and introduction, and we talked about the thesis statement. So so that is going to be graded, not like your big formal grade, but it's going to be one of the graded assignments. So my response to that will be sent to you either via email, or you'll have a link that is in Blackboard, but will say, but you will be able to open it. Like anybody can't just click and open it. So, but when I do make the response and I email it to you, I'm going to send you a note on Blackboard where you uploaded your assignment, and just letting you know I've emailed my response to you, so you should go and look at it. So if you haven't seen that, then you don't have it. So that's that. So I want to talk about two things related to I started grading the assignment. So I want to say two things. One is, and it has to do with revision. So one is that if you do an assignment, right, and I write comments on it, right, and then the idea is that you would to make the corrections on that assignment, and that those corrections should appear in your next draft, right? So in this case, you submitted two paragraphs, I commented on them. You should have corrected those paragraphs and put them into this essay that you did for the last assignment. So so there's two things I saw with some of them. Some people did not make those corrections. So I'm like, why am I going through the trouble of doing this? And it's not necessarily the trouble, but making the effort to share what things need to be corrected if the same corrections are going to be repeated in the revision. So I say this now because you will have opportunities to do revisions, right? So like your next essay, which I will talk about a little later, the formal essay that's not due today, originally we moved it, right? That the VIP essay, your first formal essay, you will have an opportunity to revise that essay. Once you get it, you write it, I grade it, I comment, and you have an opportunity to improve the grade. So some of the corrections may be like information that's left out, but one of them is going to be corrections. And if you don't make the corrections on the revision, then to me, it almost says that either you're not paying close attention and you have to pay closer attention, or that there's something about it that you're not giving it the kind of care that you need to make your writing improve. So just keep that in mind as you make your corrections. And sometimes you could miss something, or maybe something you didn't understand it. That's okay. But if I notice that like almost the same exact errors are occurring, then that's not showing me that you're making an effort to try to make an improvement, right? And so something could be as simple as I think I mentioned this in one of the classes, several of you seem to put a space between the period and the last word of the sentence. And the period just goes right after that very last letter. You don't put it underneath. You don't keep a space in between those two. I'll find an example and show you all. So I just want to say that about the assignments as I continue to grade. So with the assignments that you submitted that we'll do this weekend, one of them is a graded one. And so that one, I will send you a note. Either you'll get the link or you'll get a note saying, check your email, I've graded it, so you can go look for it, okay? And I will get those done. I mean, realistically, I'll have those done by Thursday. So that way you have them, you'll have my comments before you need to do your VIPS, okay? So that's one. That's one, maybe that's one and two. So, okay, so we'll keep going. So the next thing I want to talk about are the summaries, and it's important that we talk about summaries, because whether you're doing like a one sentence summary, which are very brief, but usually for your papers you're going to be doing a summary that's about 2 to 3 sentences, right? And you have to, and how do you tell somebody, like, which is great about Salvation, right? We read it together, that if nobody read that story, Salvation, that there has to be some way that that if you told them about it without going into too much explanation, that they would understand what that story is about, right? So so I want to share one of your responses with the class, and I very often do that. I like to use examples from all of you that that you've written here, and then for us to look at them together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with my screen and share one of the responses that one of you wrote to the story Salvation. And in case you, oh, there was something else I did want to say that was important. There were two things I said. One was about revision. The other thing is that to make sure that when you are signed in, that the name that you are signed in as um, is representative of the name that's in CUNY first. That it's okay. Like for instance, I could see you, Umu. I could see your name, but that's also your name. So it's okay if it says Umu by itself. That's okay. But some people, sometimes it says like, you know, Brian's iPhone, right? And so I have two Brians in the class, I think, right? So I need to know which Brian it is. And sometimes somebody had in this class as well may have had somebody's iPhone, but it wasn't their iPhone. It was like their brother's or their partner's iPhone. So just make sure when you sign in, because one of the ways we do when I do attendance is I just look at the Zoom login, and the Zoom kind of, when you all sign in, Zoom kind of does a log of everybody that signs in, and it tells me who attended class and et cetera. So that's why I don't do a roll call for attendance. I don't take time doing that because Zoom does it for me. But I have been doing my attendance records, and every time I run into like, who is this person? Because they're not listed on the class. So just make sure that that's the other thing I wanted to make sure. All right. So going back to salvation. So if you were not here, if you missed our class last week and you had the chance maybe to look it up, and read it. Salvation is a story by Langston Hughes, and Langston Hughes is a writer from the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem, if you ever think when Langston Hughes got started and was shaking things up in the 1920s and the 30s, in the 20s, he was your age. Some of your ages, some of you in your 20s, some of you are older, but he was in his 20s. So I always think it's very prolific what people do when they're in their 20s, right? It's a time of your life where you could do all kinds of things. And so Langston Hughes was part of the Harlem Renaissance. Now, they didn't call it the Harlem Renaissance. That became its name much later in history, but it was a time when he and several other young Black writers, mainly, but there were writers, there were musicians, there were painters, there were artists that were coming together, and they were making a lot of change by bringing their voices forward. So he's written lots of stories, but the one we read in class was a story was a childhood memory, right? It was a memory of him, and there's the word epiphany. Does anybody know what the word epiphany means? You could take a guess, put it in the chat, or unmute yourselves. Okay, I'm just checking the chat to see if anybody wants to.
It's like kind of like a grasp of reality. Like some people be like, "Oh, I had an epiphany about whatever is gonna happen," or so on and so forth, stuff like that.
Yes, that's close. It's like you did the gesture, a realization. Like suddenly, oh my God, I realized something, right? And so very often in life, we have moments that we have an epiphany, and they call those moments epiphanic, Epiphanic. So I get into it, but I'll write in the chat. Okay, that's a good place to get it right away, right? So, oh my God, Giancarlo's in the waiting room, sorry. Sorry, Giancarlo, I didn't see you got kicked out. So I'm gonna write the word. This is epiphany, writes the word, and then the phrase. Right, so epiphany and then epiphanic moment. So if you look at the chat, you could see how the words look similar, right? Epiphanic means of, it's more of an adjective, right? So it's an epiphanic moment. So epiphanic moments are moments in life when we realize something, right? Like sometimes you think one thing and then you realize, oh, that's not how it is. Like you might think, I don't like coffee, and then you drink coffee, like, oh my God, I just realized I love coffee. I can't believe I just realized this. So with Langston Hughes, his epiphanic moment, the epiphany that he has, right, is that he realizes that something that he was told, right, may not be true. And sometimes that happens with us with Santa Claus, those of us who study, whose cultures are about Santa Claus, like when you're little, they tell you, Santa Claus brought you this, and you believe it, and then somehow you realize, oh, that's not the case, right? There's no Santa Claus. And it's not exactly the same thing, but like religion and spirituality, there is a communal sense of it, and there's also a personal sense to it. And for Langston Hughes, it was this realization as a child of the possibility of what he is told may not, by the elders may not be true, right? It may be a different things, right? Yes, Samantha. That definitely, that's another aspect, right? When you're in terms of gullible, but also you don't know, right? You're a child, you're learning, right? And so if your parent tells you something, right, or somebody of authority, your inclination most of the time is to believe them, right? Or like, why would they lie? But they do it all the time. I mean, lying, for other reasons, right? If we took another class with me, you'd be reading a poem called White Lies, and they talk about lies, like how sometimes we say they're white lies, and they're lies that are meant to protect people, or lies that are meant to not be harmful. But if we can go hold debate about lies. But anyway, so one of the big ideas in oh, perfect, here we go. Anya's phone is signing into class. So one of the things that with that is that moment, but for us to be able, so that is one of the main ideas in salvation, right? There's a couple of them, right? One is that realizing something is different that you didn't believe. One is feeling the consequences of lying, right? Maybe guilt, feeling guilt, is another big thing inside of this story that Langston Hughes is sharing with us. So let me open it. And I apologize, my computer's been working very slowly, and I don't know if my um, connection. Just bear with me one moment. Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen with you all. I just wanted to make sure it was open before. All right, so I'm gonna make us small. Let me go to the side. So the beginning of it, of the piece says, I was saved from sin when I was going on 13, but not really saved. It happened like this. There was a big revival at my Auntie Reed's church. Every night for weeks, there had been much preaching, singing, praying, and shouting, and some very hardened sinners have been brought to Christ. And the membership of the church had grown by leaps and bounds. Then, just before the revival ended, they held a special meeting for children to bring um, the young lambs to the fold. My aunt spoke of it for days ahead. That night, I was escorted to the front row and placed on the mourner's bench with all the other young sinners who had not yet been brought to Jesus. My aunt told me that when you're saved, you saw a light and something happened to you inside, and Jesus came into your life. And God was with you from then on, she said. You could see and hear and feel Jesus in your soul. I believed her, and I had a great many old people say the same thing, and it seemed to me they ought to know. So I sat there calmly in the hot, crowded church waiting for Jesus to come to me. And of course, there's more to the essay. There's another 2 pages, but this is a 3-page essay. And so what I was asking everyone to do, I'm going to stop sharing. So I was asking everybody to do was to write a summary, right? And so we did a handout, and the summary was like first identify what's the main point, and then to write down some of the other points on it, right? So I'm going to share with you one of the summaries that you all did in this class. 1 second. I, I'm seeing why my computer might be running so slowly. I realize I have a bunch of files opened up in. Make it big news. And then I'll make some minor corrections to it as we read it. Okay. And I'll talk about it. So here's an example of one of the assignments that was submitted to us. So I'm going to do. So first, I'm going to read it. In Salvation by Langston Hughes, the author introduces the idea that people make decisions they wouldn't ordinarily make because of pressure put on them by others. Langston was a 12-year-old boy when his aunt took him to her church to get saved by God. Langston's aunt explained to him the process of salvation. When you were saved, you saw a light and something happened to you inside, and Jesus came into your life, and God was with you from then on. She said you could see and hear and feel Jesus in your soul. Time had passed, songs had been sung, and everyone had been saved besides Langston and one other boy, Wesley. Many old people knelt around them and started praying. Wesley had gotten impatient and decided to just get up and be saved by Jesus, although he hadn't seen him. Langston was then left by himself on the mourner's bench, and his aunt started sobbing in front of him, begging him to be saved by God. Langston felt ashamed of himself for taking so long to be saved. Since nothing happened to Wesley, he decided to lie and say he saw Jesus. As soon as he stood up, everyone was celebrating and shouting. Later that night, Langston was crying because he felt guilty for lying to his aunt and everyone at the church, and ended up losing his faith in Jesus since he didn't help them. All the people in the church watching him and praying for him, and especially his aunt, forcing the idea of being saved and how important it is to him, he felt obligated and that he had no other choice but to lie to appease everyone. Okay. So, any opinions of the summary? Loved it. Okay, so that's cool. Any other comments? You can unmute. You could write in the comments. Got straight to the point. Okay, that was Joshua's contribution. Got to the point. So, did anybody think that, oh, that sucked? You could do it. We're grown. We could take it. No, nobody thought it sucked. Okay. Um, it was, I mean, I think let's take a look at it again. So we can see it. So some of the strengths of this, and I'm going to make a couple of corrections. And so listen to this because these are things that I see very often, right? I'm going to see if I can make it just a little bigger. I'll see it. Right. So so one thing that happens very often happens like right here, right? So one of the things you should think about is that the punctuation goes inside of the, I'm not gonna, goes inside of the, in there. So in this case, the comma goes inside the quotation mark, right? So keep that in mind, because very often I see the period or the comma outside of the quotation. Keep in mind that it goes inside. Then the person, right here, Langston Hughes, right? We get it right at the beginning. The author introduces the idea that people make decisions they wouldn't ordinarily make because of pressure put on them by others, which is another important point, a main point of this story. So right in the first sentence, this person decided to put this boom right in front. So that in case, if nobody read anything else on this summary, they got in one sentence what the main idea was. And then they go on to explain the action, right? So Langston was 12, was taken to the church, right, to be saved by God. Langston's aunt explained to him the process of salvation, right? This is an important point. When you're saved, they use a quote. So if you notice here at the end of the quote, again, here's this outside the period. I'm just going to move it right inside there. Take it out, right? Then time passed, songs have been sung by everyone, have been saved beside Langston, another boy, Wesley. Many old people knelt around them and started praying. I would put a period here instead of a, right? Wesley had gotten impatient and decided to get up and go be saved by Jesus, although he hadn't seen him, right? Important point. He got up even though he was just like exhausted. So then Langston was left alone. His aunt started sobbing in front of him, begging him to be saved by God. Langston felt ashamed of himself for taking so long to be saved. Since nothing happened to Wesley, he decided to lie and say he saw Jesus. As soon as he stood up, everyone was celebrating and shouting. Later that night, Langston was crying because he felt guilty for lying to his aunt and everyone at church and ended up losing his faith in Jesus since he didn't help him with all the people in the church watching him. This is kind of a summarizing sentence. Praying, and especially his aunt for forcing the idea of being saved and how important it is to him, he felt obligated and that he had no other choice but to lie and appease everyone. So, in general, this is it hit a lot of the points. Even if you didn't read the essay, but we did, I feel that most of it is in there. Wesley is an important character in this story because Wesley lies and there's no consequence to his lying, right? He gets to lie and actually he gets celebrated for lying, saying he saw Jesus. So the people in the church were more interested in this activity rather than having a real religious experience, right? Not that people don't have it, but in this case, sometimes it may take more time. The only thing I would say to make this stronger is to think about ways to make it even shorter, right? So I think a lot of the first part is good, is pretty much there or essential. And then when we get to the second part after here, we can start looking at places that 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 could be cut, right? An example might be here. We have Wesley had gotten impatient and decided to get up and go be saved by Jesus. This is something with it, although he hadn't seen him. Langton was left alone by himself on the mourner's bench, right? You could even take this out because we heard earlier that they were praying and sobbing, and this person's gonna repeat it later on the bench, and say and right here, and felt ashamed of himself for taking so long to be saved, right? Period. Right. So we can, since nothing happened to Wesley, he decided to lie and say he saw Jesus, right? And then you can even take this out. Later that night, Langston was crying because he felt guilty for lying to his aunt, and everyone at church ended up losing his faith in Jesus. And it's there. And you could technically stop there because you got most of it in, but this is fine to do some summarizing sentence at the end. And then summarizing sentence at the end, we get the idea reinforced. Although the people in the church watching him and praying for him, and especially his aunt forcing the idea of being saved and how important it is to him, onto him, he felt obligated, right? So all of this stuff that we cut out about them sobbing and being alone, that kind of gets repeated down here. So, but you could see these are minor, this is like just minor ways to make something a little tighter or a little smaller. But the way it was originally was perfectly fine. Like if I was going to grade it, I would give it a good grade, right? It would get like an A, or if I wanted to be nitpicking, an A minus with some grammatical errors. But at the beginning, the first you get a little bit from now to October, a little bit of leeway with the grammatical errors affecting your grade. I'm going to stop sharing. You get a little bit of leeway between now and the middle of October because we're still talking and I'm still making changes on your paper. But by the mid-October, I want to start seeing that you're paying attention to those changes, right? And that you're making those corrections in there. Okay. What did you think about what I just did? Was it clear reading the summary, showing how this particular person had used his main idea and only basically gave facts to support that idea, right? Didn't talk about, that the church was hot, didn't talk about this, didn't talk about all these things that you may not need to know, but kind of stuck to specific points and use some language like the lie. It was important to use the word lie, right? That's like big. I mean, if if you're a believer, it's big to do that. Any thoughts or questions? Yes, Miguel.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say like I I am probably the worst of writing because I don't know I never tried to learn very good. So I just want to know two things like when do you use the commas and when do you use the periods?
Mhm.
Like I want to know where to use them.
So periods, usually that's the easy one. They're at the end of a sentence. When you're done
Yeah,
with a sentence, you put a period, right? Um, commas think of sometimes, this is not the best analogy, but think of a breath. Like when you need to, right, to a breath. So sometimes inside of a sentence, you have an idea, right? So like, I will say something in the story, in the story, the author said, right? So in the story, comma, the author said. So very often the comma separates clauses in a sentence, right? An idea in a sentence, right? That's one time commas are used. Another time commas are used are sometimes when you're using a list in a sentence, right? So if you say, he went to the store, to the movies, and then home. So the store, comma, the movies, so very often comma, and then home, right? So so those are two things. What I could do is also look for like share a handout with you on usage of commas, because commas are uh, are are used differently. Like periods are clear, end of a sentence, period, right? But the end of the sentence could also be a question mark, right? If it's a question, the end of a sentence could be an exclamation point. If you want to be emphatic or make a that kind of so you could do that. But commas usually sometimes students sometimes have a little issues with commas because there are commas kind of separate an idea. So in dialogue, comma also separates. If I was going to write a sentence that said, Miguel said, comma, quotation, I went to the store, period, quotation mark, right? So that's what commas do. They kind of separate ideas and separate clauses inside of sentences, right? Um, so, you know, the best way to do it is to write. And I'm gonna challenge you, Miguel. I'm gonna challenge you in how you see yourself, because sometimes if we say I am a terrible writer, I am, so it's important to have like a more measured opinion of yourself, because it's easy to think I'm the best, I'm the best writer in the world. Then it's harder for you to learn, and for you to say I'm the worst, or I can do this, I'm the worst writer, that also feeds you. And I know just from the experience of writing that you're not as bad as you think you are. right? And this is your
Thank you. Thank
professor
you very much.
who has read some of the things that you've written and has commented, right? And so sometimes the image you give yourself is not the Miguel I meet on that page.
Thank you. Thank you. No, the only thing is that I said that is because I I didn't go to the school to learn English. I learned it by myself, and every little thing that I learn, I try
Mhm,
to absorb it as much as I can. I'm
mhm.
sorry if I make a lot of questions, but this is why we're here for, right?
Exactly. And sometimes there may be people who are not on camera or muted, and they may have the same question, and it helps someone else asking it helps get it into the room. So that's perfectly fine to do that. So I spent a little time on the summary because we're going to do that here today together. We're going to read an article, and then I'm going to give you some time to begin working on a summary. So I want you to be able to get a little bit of practice with that, because it's something that you will do also. This is a little bit of a hint, right, of what you're going to be doing with your research project, right? So your research project is going to be I'm giving you a little bit of hint of something that you don't have to worry about or think about for the next 6 weeks, right? But it's basically going to do an annotated bibliography, right? And an annotated bibliography, yes, this is great. An annotated bibliography is basically you're doing research on articles and being able to write a summary of the article that you find, right? You to find an article and then write a summary of it. And that's what the annotated bibliography. So I'm just spending this little time last week and this week on the idea of summary, because it's going to help you in two ways. One, it's going to help you to identify what is the main idea in an article. And that way, when you're writing your essays, when you only have 2 or 3 sentences, you can summarize the article in 2 or 3 sentences. And also when you're later on, when you're doing your annotated bibliography, where your sentences are going to be about 5 to 7 sentences, the paragraphs are going to be 5 to 7 sentences, you'll have that experience of doing that. Okay. And so for today, we're gonna do two things today. We're gonna work on that piece of the summary, right? We're gonna work on the idea of the summary, and then we're gonna go over the assignment for the VIP essay, where a couple weeks ago you all had to do something where you selected somebody and had to write 3 characteristics, and we're gonna do a small exercise around that. Okay, so it is 1:12, which is perfect. And so we're going to read, I'm going to read you an article for the sake of time. I will read the article to all of you. And then I'm going to give you some time to just begin writing a summary of the article. And then we'll talk about it. And then you can clean it up and do that as an assignment, that'll be due later on. But today we're going to begin it, okay? And what I want to do today with it too um, is for folks when we share back to say at least what you felt the main idea of the article was, right? So let's read it. So the article was open 5 seconds ago. I may have closed it in my eagerness to close things. Maybe it's open in here. Spend a lot of time getting ready. That's why opening up all these damn files. That's why I'm like, when I don't find them, I'm like, what the heck? So let me share my screen with you all. All right, so this is another, when we read How to Take My Parents to Taking My Parents to College, it was a New York Times opinion. Here's another New York Times opinion article that we're going to share. This one is called How to Get Your Mind to Read, and it's by Daniel T. Willingham, and it also appeared in the New York Times. Okay. So here's what Daniel has to say. Daniel T. Willington has to say. Americans are not good readers. Many blame the ubiquity of digital media. We're too busy on Snapchat to read, or perhaps internet skimming has made us incapable of reading serious prose. But Americans' trouble with reading predates digital technologies. The problem is not bad reading habits engendered by smartphones, but bad education habits engendered by the misunderstanding of how our minds read. I'm going to pause. I'm going to come back into the room. So the beginning paragraph of any essay is the introduction, right? So it's introducing you to what is going to be talked about. So if we look at Daniel T. Willingham's How to Get Our Minds to Read, what did he say in that first paragraph? That Americans are not good readers, and why? Does anybody remember why?
Um, are we saying why like people are saying they're bad readers, or what's his opinion on that?
What's his opinion?
So he stated that everyone is trying to say that it's because of smartphones. However, it's more of like your comprehension of what you're reading.
Yes, the first part was that. He's definitely saying, people say, oh, people in Americans are not good readers because they're too busy on their phones, they're too busy on Snapchat. But he's saying this problem with reading predates that. Like this issue with reading goes before smartphones. He says it's not necessarily that, although I will say, or we could say maybe it contributes to it, but it's not necessarily that. But he says instead that it is an issue with I'm going to treat it right. Um, it's about bad education habits. Right? So that's what Daniel is saying, right? That it's about bad education habits. So what do you think he's going to do with the rest of this essay?
Um, I don't know if anybody else wants to go. But I think he's gonna, in the next paragraph, he's gonna basically explain what he means by bad educational habits. Sorry, I have like containers on. Bad educational habits, and
Yes.
then he's probably gonna speak about like everybody else's input on like how the media affects how we learn.
Mhm. Well, definitely we know that. We know that that's bingo, bingo, right? That and people know bingo, that's a game that you put letters on it and you win when you get it right. So that's what I'm saying bingo. I said that one to someone, they were like, what is bingo? What is like, so bingo, right? You got it right. Yeah, definitely. He better talk about bad education habits. If that's the whole point, if he's saying, listen, everybody's saying that it's Snapchat and it's the phone, but it's actually bad education habits. So we should expect him to break it down. Okay. So let's go back to the sharing my screen and then we'll read the rest of the article unless I feel that, right? And then he goes, just how bad is our reading problem? The National Associate Assessment of Adult Literacy from 2003 is a bit dated, but it offers a picture of Americans' ability to read in everyday situations. Using an almanac to find a particular fact, for example, or explaining the meaning of a metaphor used in a story. Of those who finished high school but did not continue their education, 13% could not perform simple tasks like these. When things got more complex in comparing two newspaper editorials with a different interpretation of scientific evidence or examining a table to evaluate credit card offers, 95% failed. Right? So he's saying in this one, now he's starting to show us like what does he mean by Americans are not good readers? And he's saying that things as simple as, or maybe using an almanac to find a particular fact, right? We could just translate that as also maybe looking something up in a dictionary, or for example, explaining the meaning of a metaphor. Like we have to know what a metaphor means and how it's used in a story. He said people who did not finish high school didn't, about 13% couldn't perform those tasks. And then he says, when things get more complex, in comparing two newspaper editorials, right, with different interpretations of scientific evidence or examining a table to evaluate credit card offers, 95% failed, right? People did graduate from college. That was from high school, right? So there's no reason to think that things have gotten better. Score for high school seniors in the National Assessment of Educational Progress reading test haven't improved in 30 years. So this big national reading test shows that the improvement hasn't happened in 30 years. That's way before smartphones, etc. Many of these poor readers can sound out words from print, so in that sense, they can read, yet they are functionally illiterate. They comprehend very little of what they can sound out. So what does comprehension require? Broad vocabulary, obviously. Equally important, but more subtle, is the role played by factual knowledge. Okay, so I'm gonna stop. I'm doing this slowly with all of you because, right? Because normally I could just read the article and then we'd read it again and go slowly, but I'm going slowly through it, right? So what Daniel Willington does next is he breaks down like, what do you mean by bad reading? And he's talking about, well, but what I mean by bad reading is not necessarily that people cannot sound out a word and read, right? You can make out ubiquity, right? But do you understand what ubiquity means, right? How do you understand that? So he said, on the one hand, there's vocabulary, right? You can look up the word, right? And so that gives you some insight. But he's saying there's something else that helps you do that, right? There's something else at play. So let's go into share the screen again. And that something else that he's talking about that helps is factual knowledge, right? Factual knowledge, right? So he says broad vocabulary, obviously, right? So he goes, what does comprehension require, right? Broad vocabulary, obviously. Equally important, but more subtle, right, is the role played by factual knowledge. So all prose has factual gaps that must be filled by the reader. Consider, I promised not to play with it, but mom still wouldn't let me bring Rubik's Cube to the library. The author has admitted 3 facts vital to comprehension to comprehend this phrase here, right? To understand this phrase, I promised not to play with it, but mom still wouldn't let me bring my Rubik's Cube to the library. So the author has admitted 3 vital components. 1, you must be quiet in the library, right? You have to know that to be in libraries, you have to be quiet. You have to know 2, Rubik's Cubes make noise, right? And 3, kids don't resist tempting toys very well. If you don't know these facts, you might not understand the literal meaning of the sentence, but you'll miss why mom forbade the toy in the library. There's another fact that he left out, but this is more vocabulary. You have to know what a Rubik's Cube is, right? So, so I'm going to stop again. So basically, he's saying that factual knowledge, like what is not on the page, you have to know that that also plays a role in you understanding it, right? So in the sentence that said, you know, mom did not let me bring my Rubik's Cube to the library, he says, first you have to understand not only like what is a library, but that in libraries you have to be quiet. And if you ever saw a Rubik's Cube, do people know what a Rubik's Cube is? Most people don't. Yes, it's that thing. And you hear a click, right? Click, 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 right? And they said, so 1, that it makes noise, 2, that it's in the library, and the library you have to be quiet, and 3, that kids, it's hard. You could bring that Rubik's Cube and you can say, I won't play with it, but at some point they may pull it out and start playing with it, right? So so that's what he means by factual knowledge. It may be knowledge that you need to understand it, but it's not on the page and they're not going to explain it to you. And if you don't have that factual knowledge, you may not understand. It may have a challenge your comprehension. So I will continue. Knowledge also provides context. For example, the literal meaning of last year's celebrated fake news headline, Pope Francis shocks the world endorsing Trump for president, is unambiguous. No gap filling is needed, but the sentence carries a different implication if you know anything about the public and private positions of the men involved, or you're aware that no pope has ever endorsed a presidential candidate. You might think that the authors should include all the information needed to understand what they write. Just tell us the libraries are quiet, but those details would make prose long, tedious for readers who already know the information. Write for your audience means, in part, gambling on what they know. These examples, this here, help us understand why readers might decode well but score poorly on a test. They lack the knowledge the writer assumed in the audience. But if a text concerned a familiar topic, habitually poor readers ought to read like good readers. In one experiment, let me just pause there, right? So, um, so he's saying that the fact that the knowledge you bring to the text, to whatever you're reading, helps you to understand it better, right? So I grew up in the Bronx. So if somebody talks about growing up in the Bronx, I'm going to bring information to that text that somebody who didn't grow up in the Bronx will not bring to it, right? So he's saying the more knowledge you have about whatever topic you're reading already, the more you'll be able to understand, right? So let's go. He's going to show us an example now of what he's talking about. this test with third graders. So in one experiment, third graders, some identified by a reading test as good readers, some as poor, were asked to read a passage about soccer. The poor readers who knew a lot about soccer were 3 times as likely to make accurate inferences about the passage as the good readers who didn't know much about the game. That implies that the students who score well on reading tests are those with broad knowledge, right? So I'm going to pause. I'm not reading. I'm just talking right now. So that example that said that students were graded using a test that used soccer, and students that were considered poor readers knew a lot about soccer, were 3 times as likely to make accurate inferences about the passage as the good readers who didn't know much about the game, right? So they're saying that these people who are considered poor readers, because they knew something about the game, they're able to make good inferences. They're able to understand it better, right? So that implies, and I'm reading again, right? I'm back here. That implies that students who score well on reading tests are those with broad knowledge. They usually know at least a little about the topics of the passages on the test. One experiment tested 11th graders' general knowledge with questions from science. Pneumonia affects which part of the body? History. Which American president resigned because of the Watergate scandal? As well as the arts, civics, geography, athletics, and literature. Scores on this general knowledge test were highly associated with reading scores. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second. So does anybody hear what part of the body does pneumonia affect?
Lungs. The lungs?
Yes, the lungs, right? You have to know that. And does anybody know which president resigned because of Watergate? Right, so there's that. Okay, it's okay. This is like not like
Can't remember his name.
Right, it was
There's like
Richard,
trivia
Richard
questions
Nixon.
over here.
Yes, Richard Nixon, right? But I'm glad you say trivia, because there's something inconsequential sometimes about the idea of trivia, but trivia is about general knowledge, right? About how you know things. And so having general knowledge is important. Thank you, Samantha, for Nixon. So having general knowledge is important because that sometimes informs the reading. So sometimes what I love reading about this article is that, like when we read Salvation, right? When we read Salvation, I gave you a little bit of context. Because if you don't go to a evangelical church, right, or church that is a Protestant church, this idea of salvation may not be something that you understand. Like, what are you talking about, salvation? What save from what, you know? But you have to have the cultural context so you understand Langston Hughes' story. But I gave that to you, right? Some of you may know it, right? I could have read it. Maybe I went to a church like that. I went to a Pentecostal church when I was a teenager in the Bronx on Prospect Avenue. That's where I used to go. I spent my teenage years there. So for me, it was, you know, firsthand knowledge. But for someone else, it would not be. All right, let me go back to finishing up the article. This is so. Here, just with the pneumonia, right? So current education practices show that reading comprehension is misunderstood. It's treated like a general skill that can be applied with equal success to all texts. Rather, comprehension is intimately intertwined with knowledge, right? Comprehension is intimately intertwined with knowledge. That suggests 3 significant changes in schooling, right? First, it points to the decreasing the time spent on literacy instruction in early grades. Third graders spend 56% of their time on literacy activity, but 6% each on science and social studies. This disproportionate emphasis on literacy backfires on later grades when children's lack of subject matter knowledge impedes comprehension. Right? So saying first, it points to decreasing the time spent on literacy instruction, right? And then here it says third graders spend 56% of their time on literacy activities. That means spelling, vocabulary, you know, those kind of sentence structure, right? But then it says 6% on science and social studies. That's 6% actually exploring subjects and topics, right? So this disproportionate emphasis on literacy backfires in later grades when children's lack of subject matter knowledge impedes comprehension. Another positive step would be to use high information texts in early elementary grades. Historically, they have been light in content. Second, understanding, sorry, this highlight. Second, understanding the importance of knowledge to reading ought to make us think differently about year-end standardized tests. If a child has studied New Zealand, she ought to be good at reading, thinking about passages on New Zealand. Why test her reading with a passage about spiders or the Titanic? If topics are random, the test weights knowledge learned outside the classroom, knowledge that wealthy children have greater opportunity to pick up, right? So the second point is that they're saying that if you study something, that the standardized tests, right? These tests that many of us took if you went to school here in high school mainly, but you've taken them since junior high school, right? Since elementary school, they use standardized tests. They're saying the standardized tests were almost basically saying if a child has studied New Zealand and the test is about New Zealand, then why is a test about random things like spiders and Titanic? Topics are random, the test weights knowledge learned outside the classroom. So that if it's a random thing like spiders or the Titanic, right? So if I was quizzing you all on presidents, you all would be like, as you were just saying with Nixon, you had a little bit of an issue with Nixon because of the lack of general knowledge that happens that happens as a result of the emphasis in the early years of that. But it's talking about, so part one is the problem with bad education habits is spending lots of time on literacy activities. Second is standardized tests that use random topics, right? And the third is the systemic building of knowledge must be a priority in curriculum design. So in the ways curriculums are designed, the Common Core standards for reading specify nearly nothing by way of content that children are supposed to know. The document valorizes reading skills. State officials should go beyond the Common Core standards by writing content-rich grade level standards and supporting district personnel in writing curriculums to help students meet the standards. That's what Massachusetts did in the 1990s to become the nation's education leader. Louisiana has recently taken this approach and early results are encouraging. So conclusion, right? Don't blame the internet or smartphones or fake news for Americans' poor reading. Blame ignorance. Turning the tide will require profound changes in how reading is taught in standardized testing in school curriculums and in school curriculums. Underlying all these changes must be a better understanding of how the mind comprehends what it reads. Okay. So Daniel Willington makes a statement about Americans reading. He then moves on to talking about, explaining what does he mean by that Americans can't read. He switches it, right, and says, really what we're talking about is comprehension, like what do you understand? And then he said from the beginning that there's some educational practices that don't support that, right? And he spends a little time talking about understanding the context, and I'm going to use the word, there's a phrase called cultural context. Like if I grew up in a Puerto Rican household, so when we talk about Puerto Rican things, I'm gonna understand it. If I grown up in a Mexican household, if I grown up in a Haitian household, if I grown up in a Bangladeshi household, if I grown up in a Senegalese household, then I would understand the culture a little differently, right? So this idea of cultural competence, like we understand it, but it's part of our place. And so it's not only about like culture where you come from, but culture like what you study, right? Culture like the language, right? Culture about music, right? So that's the case he's making. And then he lays out 3 points, right, that he thinks need to be addressed. One was talking about first point, he's talking about the time spent on literacy activities in early curriculum as opposed to subject-based, right? So he's saying that we need to focus more, add more subject-based than only literacy in the early grades. Then 2 is saying that standardized tests need to be tailored, right? Need to be designed for the different people, not just understanding them all, because only if you do it standard, there's a different level of access to information based on economics, right? And then the third is saying that that the curriculum needs to be rewritten so that you to add more context, more content rich, like subjects to the early levels, not so much, reinforcing the first point of literacy. Okay, so he makes those 3 points and then does a conclusion saying, don't blame the internet, blame how we are educated, right? That affects our reading comprehension, right? So that is essentially what he does. So it is 1:35. I'm gonna say this. Um, I'm gonna say, begin writing a summary, right? Begin a summary of this. Oh, by the way, this article is in Blackboard. Um, let me just share my screen a moment. I think by now you all know where things are, but if you go to Blackboard, right, and this is our class, and there's a folder that has handouts, one that has essays, and there's William's How to Get Our Mind to Read. Here's a little heads up. This will be a little bit of your homework. Is Google making us stupid? That's the next thing we're gonna read. And How to Get Our Minds to Read, you click it, right? You open it up, and that way you'll have access to it yourselves. And so keeping in mind what we talked about in terms of summaries. So I want you to think of I want you to write a summary that's between 5 and 7 sentences, and just think about what is the main idea? What do you think the main idea is? And remember the summary that I shared of your classmate? They write at the beginning, put the main idea right at the beginning. So some of you may have a different idea of what the main idea is because you could see it from different angles. But so that's your activity. So it's 1:37 now. So I want you to write for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll take a break, and then I'm not going to stop the break. We're gonna go write. You're gonna write, and we're gonna go into the break, and then we're gonna come back at 2:05. Or 5 minutes after 2, we will come back. So I'm gonna ask you I'm gonna use the honor system, and from now for the next 10 or 15 minutes to write your summary, and then you can take a break if you want, or you can do it however you want. You want to take a break and then write. But at 2:05, we're going to come back, and by 2:05, I'm expecting you all to do the summary. And Nahom, not today. You will put the summary on Blackboard that you write for this article, but not today. So I mean, you could do it by tonight. By the end of class tonight, I'll open the window. By midnight, you can submit your summary of this piece. Don't worry about putting it while you're in class. I mean, the syllabus might say that because originally I was thinking people would write it, upload it, but in this class and another class, any of the live writing, some people write on a pad, some people want to edit it, and I'm like, fine, edit, write, and then I'll put it tonight. But okay, so I'm going to be quiet. You'll have access to the article, and so then work on your summaries, and at 5 after 2, we'll come back. Okay. Hey, Joshua.
Hello. I'm gonna be honest. I feel like I need a little bit more help with like summarizing
Mhm.
because I feel like one of my weakness there, like how to summarize a essay or somebody's paper or an article. Like I really struggle with that topic right there.
Mhm. So we'll do a couple of things. I mean, part of what we're doing now is that, like, suddenly on the spot, having read an article, what do you need to do? You know, I was trying to give you points, like, you know, find the main idea, find out what the important things are to add into it. Like, you don't want to write about everything, but we'll see how folks did. And then that's why you'll submit it, after class, you can work on it and submit it tonight, unless there's some eager students that that I have in class, and no, nobody's done it. And sometimes they submit it like immediately, they do it right away. But that way I'll take a look at it. And then Joshua, one of the things, yeah, it's already posted now. The assignment's already on Blackboard for this. That's due for tonight. It's on there. So, and the other thing we could also do, of course, I'm here during class, but we could always, if there's ever an assignment or something, this is for Joshua and anybody in the class. If you ever wanted to like work on something specifically with me, we could always do office hours. You could either come during, let me know you're coming during one of the scheduled ones, or we can make an appointment and meet up and, meet for like a half an hour. Victor, I don't think is back yet. I thought Victor would be back. Victor, who is the tutor for this class, also is available to do some work with. He's phone. So Annie's phone, who just signed in, they just get popped out again. Oh, you're still here. So Annie's phone, just make sure that whatever name is is a name that I'm going to recognize when I do attendance. Because I was before, I think you signed into class, said I was having that issue with someone writing. It was somebody's phone, but the name wasn't here. No, we're back, Samantha. Yeah, we're back. It was 2:05, but we come back at 2:08. But we're back. If you need a minute, it's okay. But we're back. Okay, so how did it go? Does anybody want to share what they did, or share anything? Say if you had difficulty with it. Say what you found challenging. But what was the experience? Or share some of what you wrote. Anyone? All right, Samantha, you raise your hand.
I wrote in this news article, How to Get Your Mind to Read by Daniel T. Willingham. He states that he does not believe it is social media and smartphones that implement people's reading. Daniel believes it's people's comprehension of what they read that plays a major role in what you read. During this article, the author states many of these poor readers can sound out words from point. So in that sense, they can read, yet they are functionally illiterate. He also states that a broad vocabulary also plays a part in knowledge. Given information from the scores of the National Assessment of Education Process reading test that hasn't improved over 30 years, as the author has mentioned. He also stresses the fact that every student takes the exact same test regardless of their comprehension level, which I agree makes no sense at all, being that every adult/child understands and learns things differently.
Okay. I love that Samantha like turned the mic off when she was done. She was like mute. Thank you for that, Samantha. Thank you so much for that. What did you folks think of what Samantha had to share? Oh wait, oh, it's still recording. Yeah. Did you feel she captured the main idea? You don't have an opinion? You can also write in the chat. Let me check the chat. Nobody wants to comment on Samantha? That's because it was fierce, right? She spoke very fast. Okay. I love the feedback. All right, she did speak fast, but I was able to understand her. I have a sister that speaks very fast, so I understand fast talk. But for my assessment of listening to Samantha's what Samantha shared, um, there were definitely spoke about the certainly had spoke about several of the main ideas inside of the piece, but really moving the responsibility of social media for people not reading well to really pointing to comprehension, and that was one of the main ideas, right? The other, okay, like she hit the main points, but not the whole main idea of it. Okay, so oops, one second. Aliyah said, I feel like she hit the main points, not the whole main idea of it. What do you mean by that? By not the whole main idea of it? Aliyah could be typing, so we'll let Aliyah type. But yeah, so the main, if you think of what the main idea is, there's two things that basically that Daniel T. Willingham is saying about our reading, poor reading. One is that one of the things that contributes is exactly what Samantha said, that our comprehension, that you could sound a word out, but if you don't understand what the word means, right? Like for instance, if I look at the screen at the top left, I'm at the top, and that all the way at the left of my screen is Joshua, right? So if somebody doesn't understand that the word Joshua is a person's name, right? You may not understand what I'm talking about if I say the word Joshua, right? So to understand that it's a person's name, usually a male identified person's name, right? A guy's name, a male identified person's name that you got. Women could be called Joshua, supposedly, too, but you would need to know that, right? So understanding the comprehension is you could sound the word out, but you understand what it means, right? Like you could probably in other languages sound out words, right? If they're written in alphanumeric letters, but you may not understand what they mean because you don't understand the language, right? So let's see. All right, so Aaliyah did not explain, but then Jalan shared their things. So I'm gonna talk about Jalan's in a moment. But back to Samantha. Samantha named the main idea and then listed several facts from the story, from the essay to support the idea, right? So that if you think of anything basic, Joshua, you're saying you were having a challenge with it. So just think about those two things, right? One is to say, what is the main idea of this? And very often I'm giving you a tip in that first paragraph. It's usually in the main idea, right? Because of an essay's, if you've written a thesis statement for your essay, right? The thesis statement says, this is what my paper is going to be about. Like not that literally, but it's saying this is what the paper is going to be about. It's going to give you what the main idea, what the main action that's going to be supported in it, right? So the other thing, in addition to comprehension, that Daniel T. Willingham says about this, a challenge with reading, I said comprehension, but he's saying how we're educated. The way our education system exists and works, it sometimes doesn't really foster the best conditions for Americans to learn how to read, right? One thing he doesn't get into is how other countries and other places do have emphasis on literacy skills, but there's a lot of culture that is taught in schools. Like a lot of history is taught from the time students are very young. I remember my cousins, Puerto Rico, learning about Puerto Rican history in like second grade. Like, and here they don't teach it till high school, right? It's like, if at all, right? You learn American history in high school, right? It's when you start you take some in the elementary school, but I mean, in junior high school, right? Maybe there's cultural things. So they're saying that the way in which we're educated, the way the American education system is set up, from the idea of too much literacy emphasis, meaning like learning how to spell the words and sound them out, and vocabulary, that a lot of attention is paid to that in the early years, and you need to. but he says there needs to be more of a balance of more subject matter in the early years. And a big thing are standardized tests. And standard means that everybody's on the same page. And we've learned that people are not on the same page. I mean, I can't even, like, would I even make my bingo reference, right? In a way, I have to explain it because there's certain people that may not have grown up playing bingo, right? When I make references to, even though American culture gets exported all over the world, right? That there may be people that I may make a reference to a movie like I've made in other classes to The Wizard of Oz, and people don't know that movie. It's not, and it's because they didn't watch it growing up on Thanksgiving for their entire lives. They just came here, right? So, so Samantha, you did a fairly good job just from like hearing it as fast as it was. That I love your LOL that you're gonna slow down, and maybe next time I will also guide you a little bit if you share in the future. But let's see what Jalan shared. My main idea is like how most people are trying to learn how to read, but their brains are making user think they're illiterate. Okay, yes, good job. Illiterate, so they can never learn or gain knowledge from reading. Okay, that is so what I would say to Jalan is if you were going to make a statement, right, about anything, that you would need to be able to point to the article in the article where that is. So a lot of the information that you shared in your um in your offering in the chat might be true, and I think some of it is true, and I know it for myself, but um but in terms of like how the brain works is not necessarily what this article was about. This article was more about the impact of the education system and the kind of knowledge that we bring into the things that we read, right? And how that knowledge impacts it. So even though the second part is closer to it about thinking about the idea of illiteracy and not being able to comprehend is something that the writer speaks about, but in terms of how the brain is working is a different kind of understanding. It has a relationship because I think the brain is about processing, and so comprehension is about processing information. But that's why with most of these things, and with anything you write, if you're particularly writing about about an article or reflecting on an article or reflecting on an essay, you have to make sure that the information you're getting is coming from that essay, right? Even though you're bringing information to it, right? Because I think that's what we're seeing, that you brought information to it. But to the subject that of Daniel's talking about, there could be another article, how the brain works, when we're reading, and that would be a different one. Okay, let's see, anything else in the chat? Oh, Miguel just complimenting Samantha, nice. Okay, so and does anybody else want to? Okay, all right, Ariel's offering, Gary.
I'll try one too. I mean, I give it a try, but I told you I was good at it. I wrote
Okay.
in the short article, How to Get Your Mind to Read by Daniel T. Willingham, talks about how people aren't good at reading. Willingham discussed that not only phones are a distraction, but also how Americans have bad education habits. For an example, he explained how people that do read still don't comprehend the assignment or work due to the lack of reading comprehension. The reason for this because reading comprehension is being misunderstood. Willingham explained the percentages of how certain people fail due to the lack of understanding of the text. People that don't know the language or usually score higher are the ones that usually score higher than other person that does. Willingham suggested that people should change how reading is taught so people can grasp the text that they are reading.
Okay. So again, a lot of the main points and the focus on comprehension is at the very top. And the one thing I would say both to you and to Samantha would be to remember that when you explain it as the main points, but the other point that he's making is that two things: it's comprehension, and that it's how we're educated. So that the educational system are the 2 points that he's making, and they're related. And so Jalan says the article that many poor readers can sound out words from the print papers. Yes, they are functionally literate because they comprehend very little of what they can sound, right? Correct. Saying that. There's a difference between being able to sound out a word and for you to understand it. And even like vocabulary, like, in the terms of a lot of times when we read things, the reason why I had you do, I think we're going to do it again. The reason why I had you do the vocabulary example with how to take my parents to college, of taking my parents to college, is because that is part of the process. For the next article that you're going to read for the next class. So I'm going to ask you to do a similar exercise, right? So that by class time next week, by next Tuesday class time, that you will have done the read the article and put the vocabulary words, and then we'll talk about the article for next time. Okay, so for next week, I'm going to ask you to look at the article, and then we'll discuss it in class on how to is Google making us stupid? That's the title of the article. Is Google making us stupid? All right, so we'll read that for next week, and then you'll do the vocabulary for that. Tonight, you're going to submit your summaries so I can take a look at them and respond to them. And now that we've had a little bit of a discussion, if you want to do any changes or make any clarifications, you can certainly do that. And then on Sunday, I believe, will be your VIP essay. And so I want to go back to that assignment now, right? So if you decide to change it, let me know. Maybe you can update the assignment. But we're at the point now where you're going to write the first formal essay from beginning to end, right? And we're going to begin with an essay that's basically, in a sense, a personal essay, right? And so I've asked you to identify someone and for you to at least write down 3 characteristics of this person, right? Of why that person's important to you. VIP means very important person, right? So, I could tell you that a very important person to me is a friend of mine named Rue. She's like one of my best friends, right? And I could say she's one of my best friends because she is loyal, like we support each other through life's big moments. She's very important to me because she is a writer and she writes these amazing essays and books about topics that are important. And she's important to me because she offers also a place of rest in my life. And what I mean by that is that I live a very, very busy life, and she and I could travel and have fun, but she is also a person that I can go to and I could sit and be quiet with. And it's important for me to have quiet and peace as part of my active, busy life. So those are the 3 reasons why Rue's important to me. So I could talk more about her being loyal. And this is an example of, I'll give you an example of one time I was feeling very, very almost sad because I was trying to, and I've been trying to get an agent for my book. And so part of the process is writing, letters to them to talk about it. So I went to see her and we sat together and she encouraged me and said, I'm on your side. I know you could do this. Let's take a look at the letter. And then she helped edit and make changes to the letter that I felt made it stronger. So that showed her like loyalty, her support. And that was one example of it. I forget what the other reasons were. I could think of them, but let's see, another reason. Maybe a place of rest, right? And so I could talk. My friend lives in Philadelphia in this very beautiful house. And I don't know if I've taught this class from there, but I think once or twice I've been there and I've taught from there. But when I go visit her at her house in Philadelphia, we get to sit, we get to be quiet, we get to sit in her yard if it's nice. She and I can cook together and spend the whole day together, and I get to relax. And all of her kids are away at either moved out or they're at college, so the house is quiet, so it's a quiet place. So I'm giving you examples of what verbally you can do, right? But I'm gonna the next step is to kind of get you in touch with that a little bit. I want you all to have the practice of speaking together. So I'm going to try it one more time, or at least another time. I'll try it again. So I'm going to break you up into groups. of let's say if I do 4, how many people in class? 17 for yeah, I'll do you to groups of 4. So there should be, about 3 to 4. If I do groups of 3, yeah, let me do groups of 3. I'm just trying to think of how much time because I don't want to, I just want to give like 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's say for 10 minutes. And I think it would be great for everybody to share, but if I think to your level of comfort, right? To you saying, I'm willing to talk about this. But get in touch with the very important person that you spoke about. I'm going to ask you just to go around, and to, I did a mistake. Okay. All right. So somebody's sending me a private message and I got distracted. So we can answer it afterward. So I'm going to break you up into groups. You'll be in groups of, I think I do 3 groups. There'll be like 6 of you in each group, 5 or 6 of you. And then take a turn, say, hi, everybody. I'm just saying because who's on camera. My name's Brian. My very important person is, my best friend, Tony. And these are the reasons why I gave. And explain at least one reason and then say, all right, I'll pass it to Logan. And if Logan's in your group, and then Logan will speak and then Logan say, I'll pass it to Miguel. And et cetera. So okay, and then I will respond to the person's private chat and I'll put you in those groups and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the VIP assignment, we'll talk about the essay, and then I think we may be done for today. Okay, for 10 minutes, I'll put you in your groups and let's see. And great, I'll have a good conversation.
Professor,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
So, for the what are the assignments that are due next Tuesday? You said.
I'm going to go over all the assignments with everybody, but for next Tuesday, one is going to be to read the article, Is Google Making Us Stupid? And to read and to do a list of the vocabulary words. That'll be for next
Did you
Tuesday.
post the vocabulary words or no?
No, you're going to look at the article and you're going to tell me what the vocabulary words are. It's to write down any words you don't understand.
Okay, and then it's that, and then the summary that we just did, right?
It's going to be, that's due tonight.
Oh, okay. So the vocab is the only thing that's due next Tuesday. There's something else.
And then on Sunday, your VIP essay is going to be due.
Oh, we have to write an essay and it's due on Sunday.
Yes.
How many pages you needed? Did you say that already?
No, but it'll be like between 3 to 4 pages.
3 to 4. Oh. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. One more question. Did you put it on Blackboard, or are you gonna put it like as in
I'm
a
going
couple
to put
days?
it after we do this exercise, and I'm going to go over all the assignments, and
Okay.
they'll be put on Blackboard.
Okay. Professor.
Yes.
For the VIP assignment. So I said mine was my parents. Do I have to pick one? Like, do I have to pick someone else? Can it be two? Does it matter
You
specifically
could
or
do
no?
2 if you want to do that. It could be your parents.
But if you wanted to change it to someone else, would you be able to do that? You have to stick to the one you already picked.
No, if you change it, just send an update in what you sent.
And the essay, just send an update.
No, so let's say in the assignment when you put in your parents and the 3 reasons, just
Yeah.
in it, do another, just update it. Say I've changed it to to whatever, Britney Spears, and these are the 3 reasons why she's important.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, it could be about anybody, like literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Nahum, Divine, Logan, Lee, Raylene, you guys, we're done?
Listen, the group was, I don't know, I guess it was kind of awkward. It was silent. Not what was going on.
Literally shared?
What happened?
Nobody shared, is what you're saying, Divine.
Yeah,
What happened?
nobody shared. I don't know. Listen, look, it was silent, so I pretended that I wasn't really listening. And I knew what you said. You said to introduce yourself and then talk about somebody special to you. But I was like, all right, can somebody explain to me what to do to try to get somebody to talk? It was silent. I don't know.
Well, we have a couple
tried.
minutes. So did you do the assignment? Did you pick someone?
No, I didn't.
Right. So I'm gonna go over the assignment with everyone. But you could pick somebody in your life. You could pick a celebrity. You could pick, whatever, somebody who's important to you, and you have to
But
talk about.
I had one question about that.
Sure.
Are you able to pick yourself as an important person?
If you were saying that you're yourself, you're important to yourself, why not? You can
Yes.
say 3 reasons why you're important to yourself.
All right, all right. I was just asking because I know it's kind of egotistical, but I'd like to choose that.
Yeah, you could certainly do that.
All right, thank
But anyone else, like Logan or Eileen, what did you all talk about? What are you thinking you should write about?
What did you say, Professor?
For the very important person, did you pick someone?
Hmm. Uh, I guess my brother, but it's more or less for like an inverse type of reason,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense.
You said inverse kind of reason?
I don't know. It's a little bit tricky to say. I know he's important to me as a person, but at the same time, he's also more or less what I shouldn't be.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, I just sent everybody a 2-minute warning, and soon everybody will come back. And I'm gonna speak to the assignment a little better, and I'll show the handout. The handout will help to give it a little more
Professor.
shape.
Okay.
Yep. Who was speaking?
Oh, that was me. I can't change it on Blackboard. So what would you like me to do?
So you can't change it, but you can edit it, right? So you can go to, there's a couple things. I'll show you what you can do. The system, is everybody back? No, still. Breakout room 1 is still doing their thing. Giancarlo and Julissa are not back. Yeah. And in a few minutes, it'll just close it for everybody in 22 seconds. Shut down. So welcome back from your breakout rooms. Let me close all this. Close. So how did it go? Did people get to talk? Yes, no, I was with group 3. Group 3 and I had a little session together because people were not talking. So they came into the main room and we talked together.
Hi.
I
I was in group 1 and I got to experience something with somebody else with a similar situation that happened. We had this the same kind of important person, so that was pretty cool. Wait,
interesting.
yeah.
All right, cool. What about someone from another group? Group 2 or 1, doesn't matter. Go ahead. Miguel.
Yeah, with Aliyah.
Uh-huh.
yeah, we share about something like similar, like our parents, our dad die. Um, our VIP person is our dad. Yeah, we get to share that the same feeling. And there was another three more people that they didn't spoke to us. Maybe their microphones are not working, but um, we would have loved to hear from their voices, right?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, how about anyone else? So what this is giving you an opportunity to do is to prepare for your next essay, right? The next essay that you're going to write, that's your formal essay. So one is to get in touch with the assignment, right? That last time, so a couple of weeks ago, I asked you to think about somebody who's very important to you and to write down three things, three characteristics why you think they're important. So if you already see the structure of the prompt of what's being asked of you, is that you are being asked to write about three things. So you're starting to formulate a 5-paragraph essay on this very important person, right? The first paragraph is going to be an introduction to who they are, right? This is going to include a thesis, which is a sentence saying what are the three things or the three reasons why this person is important to you. Then the first paragraph is going to explore the first reason. The second paragraph is going to explore the third paragraph is going to explore the second reason. And the fourth paragraph is going to explain the third reason. So the 1, 2, and 3 reasons why they're important. And the last one is the conclusion, right? So that will be it. That'll be your 5-paragraph essay, an introduction, 3 body paragraphs explaining why this person is important, and a conclusion. So let's look at the assignment that I'm going to put on Blackboard. And I'll share my screen so we can read it, and we'll put it up, and then you can ask questions if you have any. But here it is, right? Essay assignment number 1. So select a person. Oh, let me make it bigger. Right? Select a person you consider important: a parent, celebrity, an athlete, a best friend, a television character, community leader, historical icon, as long as any person, and identify at least 3 reasons why they are important. Then write a well-organized, well-developed, correct essay about this person. The essay should be 3 to 4 pages in length, formatted in MLA format, which means margins of 1 inch, double space. The typeface should be Times Roman or Arial and be at 12 point. The first page should be set up with your name, my name, the class section and date. Remember the exercise we did last class where we went over the different components of the first page, right? And then each page numbered in the top head. So all that in top upper right-hand corner inside of in the header. And so that's that. So then the essays due by the start, no, in fact, by start class, essays due by Sunday, right? October 3rd by 11:59 p.m. on Blackboard, right? So I'm going to put these instructions up on Blackboard so you'll have them. And really, it's a kind of, today I wanted you all to get what I did with all of you talking about my friend Rue. I'm not just talking about my friend Rue. I was modeling a little bit of saying I identified somebody. I came up with at least 3 reasons why they were important to me. And then I told you why. I gave examples why that person to illustrate the importance to me. So that's what I would like you to do, right? So that you would identify this person you have, right? If you have not, now you're behind the game. Now you got to think of somebody. You got to come up with 3 reasons, but it's okay. You have time to do it, right? And then you could, and then you're going to write the essay. So the essay, we have an introduction. Of course, you have to name who they are. You have to give us some sense of who they are, like summarize in 2 or 3 sentences who they are to you, and then tell us the 3 reasons why they are. And the 3 reasons will make up your thesis statement, will be why they are important. And that means, and because they're fun, they are supportive, they're this, because they're those 3 characteristics. They're exciting, or they're famous, or they're whatever it is, the reasons why that are important to you. And then your body paragraphs give us more detail why they are important to you. Are there any questions with the assignment? Just pausing because sometimes people type slower than we can speak. Okay, so let me go over all of the assignments, right, that we've talked about in this class, right? And normally this class, like I say, in real time meets twice a week, but unfortunately because they created this, now we meet once a week, and then the other part is this work that you're doing on your own, which is what some of these other assignments are. So one, tonight, you're gonna take your summary, type it out, put it on Blackboard, right? That's to today. Sunday, you're going to finish your VIP. You finish sooner, great. But if you want to do that, if you want to send me your introduction between now, you have until between now and Thursday to send me your introduction. If you want to write the introduction to your VIP thing, just to have me look at it and comment, you can do that, okay? But by Thursday, but Sunday is when it needs to be due. And then the last thing is you're going to read the article, Is Google Making Us Stupid? And you're going to look for the vocabulary words inside of it. And you're going to just write a little list of vocabulary words of things that you looked up. And then we'll do that exercise when we come back next week, Tuesday. And that's it. That's what you have for this week. Right? So you have a summary, a writing assignment, and a reading assignment. Okay. So what I just said, because there's about 6 students missing today, I will also send out an email, and that way you all have you'll have the summary in an email, and then if you have any questions, just email me, or you know how to reach me. On Wednesday, tomorrow, I plan to actually be on campus. I'm going to teach my class from my office tomorrow. I might try that with all of you. Someday I may go into my office and teach. Maybe next week I'll teach from my office. I also try doing that on campus. All right, so we are finished a little early today. I'm sure finishing a little early is always appreciated. But I'm also happy to stay on. If anybody has questions, I can stay on as well. If you don't have questions, look for my email. I'll do it today, and I'll open up I opened up for tonight. The summary one is already open, so that as on Blackboard as a discussion, and I'll add the other two, which is the VIP and the reading assignment vocabulary one. I'll put that on there. Thank you all. It's always a pleasure to see at least the faces that show themselves and the pictures, and to hear your voices when you all speak. And we had a moment when we're group number 3 were together, and we got to chance. I got to speak to Divine and Logan, so I got to hear you guys speak. So thank you so much for your time and your energy, and have a great week. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye,
Excuse me,
Professor.
Professor.
Sure.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
For the 3-page essay, you said 1 page only has to be on name and the date. Like, is that like a whole page only has to be on name and the date? And then we start in the second page?
No. So if you last class, you can take a look at it, but the first page has to be formatted in a particular kind of way. In the very first page, and I'll show you an example, right? Should be that.
Okay, and what if, like, for the essay, what if, like, you can't reach 3 pages, like you wrote all you can, like?
You should be able to. Then I'm gonna say if you.
I'll try my best.
Yeah, if you have 3 ideas and you feel like that's not enough, then think of a 4th idea or 4th reason. If somebody's that important to you, you should be able to write at least 10 reasons why that person's important to you, right? If they're an important person, you should find at least 10 reasons. So if you find that you've written 3, but remember, you have to say why the person is important and explain why. So to say my dad's important because he cares about me, that doesn't tell me anything, right? You have to show me, what does he do that's caring? My dad's important to me because he cares about me. He picks me up at school. He drove me. I can tell you, my dad used to drive me out to college, even when he was hungover. He would help me with my homework, right? When things were difficult. He was also somebody that I could turn to and talk to, and I could give you an example of the conversation we had. So just one idea about my dad being important, that I can give you just one. So it's not just saying my dad's important because he cares. You have to show why he cares. Like give an example, give several examples. So that should help you fill it out now.
All right. For the heading, the format, do I go on Blackboard to find that?
Yeah, I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to go onto Blackboard, right? And I'm gonna go to, let's go to our class. And then if you look at the handouts, right? You go to course content. I just clicked it. And then in handouts, there's a handout that says formatting the first page of your paper, MLA with a sample. And so if you click that open, last class we kind of went through it, went through the whole exercise. They created some live in the room. And so.
Because you said we have to write a heading for, you said the first page should only be a heading. I was confused, that's why, okay.
Okay, yeah, so the first page, these are the instructions, but this is what your first page should look like.
Oh, okay,
Right?
all right, okay.
Like your name up here, the professor's name,
Okay.
the class, right? The headline, the title, the page number, and then and then you write your essay. So this only appears on your first page. It doesn't appear in every page.
Okay.
Right? All this information that I'm running my cursor around, right? The title, all that stuff is just in the first page. Of course, the page number appears on every page, your last name and the page number. Okay?
Oh, yeah, I got it. Thank you.
All right, sure.
I have a go.
All right, take care. Any other questions? No more questions? Look at the chat. Thank you, thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, then have a great afternoon. Brian, I want to ask what is you have wrapped around you? It looks warm.
It's a throw blanket. It's just I was feeling a little cold in here.
Right. Is it fluffy though? It looks fluffy.
It's furry.
Yeah, it's fur. All right. I love faux fur. I noticed it when you put it on. I was like, what is that? Anyway.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be
it's
distracting.
Cool. No, I'm just jealous. I want one. So but anyway, all right. Well then take care, everybody. I will see you all next week.